Hello, third graders. This is our third read aloud for The Wind in the Willows, and this chapter is called The Open Road. So, what have we already learned? In the previous lesson, you learned about the literary tool of perspective. So, what is perspective? If you remember, perspective is who we're following in the story. Who is it that we know their feelings and we know their thoughts? It's who the reader's following along in the story. So far, we've been following Mole around, right? He's the one we saw spring cleaning. We heard how he felt when he fell in the water when the boat tipped over. And so far, it's been in Mole's perspective. Okay? Do you remember what dialogue is? Dialogue is another literary tool. Dialogue is when the characters are talking, and it's shown by what's called quotation marks, right? They tell us that it's a character saying those words instead of just narration. So narration is the rest of the story where we're being told what's happened by the narrator, whoever's telling the story, right? But not one of the characters that's speaking aloud to the other characters. All right, so now we're going to talk about something called a theme. What is a theme? It's a broad idea that comes up many times over the course of a story or book. Themes are another part of fiction writing, like characters, setting, and plot, which the author uses to help to guide the story. There are many reoccurring themes in The Wind in the Willows. This means that the themes are repeated again and again in the story. Some of these recurring themes are friendship or loyalty, responsibility, and irresponsibility. So theme is usually one or two words that describe the big idea of the story. So something that you're kind of learning about as the story goes along. So we can see lots of examples of friendship already in our story. Other stories might have a theme of family, like the main focus is the character's family, or revenge, or bravery, or responsibility. What does friendship mean to you? If you looked at the word friendship, what would that mean to you? Who are your friendships? What kind of actions show friendship to you? All right, in The Wind in the Willows, how have we seen friendship? Remember we talked yesterday about let bygones be bygones. Who in our story yesterday let bygones be bygones? You remember it was Rat, right? Even though Mole was selfish and tried to take over the boat and they tipped over, Rat wasn't upset with him and held a grudge. He said that he was just going to let it go, right? He said, let bygones be bygones, is how he was acting. Let what happened, happened, and we can get over it and be friends still. That's an example of friendship. What does it mean to be loyal? Okay? Loyalty is a good example of friendship, but it's its own thing also. When someone is loyal, that means they stay faithful and committed to something or someone no matter what. So you are loyal to your favorite sports team, even if they lose, right? You're not like, well, they're not my favorite anymore because they lost a game. You're loyal. You stick with them no matter what happens. There's the bell. The themes of responsibility and irresponsibility also appear throughout The Wind in the Willows. What does it mean to be a responsible person? You all are having to be responsible people to get on your Google Meets at the right time, getting your work done. That takes responsibility. So someone who takes care of the things he or she is supposed to. A responsible person does good work and can be trusted and depended on to do the right things. What do you think irresponsibility is? If responsibility is doing the right thing, irresponsibility is doing the wrong thing, right? So the prefix means that extra part of the word in the front that we added to responsibility, ear, IR, that actually means not. So if you add ear to the beginning of a word, you're saying not that. So not responsible is what you're saying. So it's an antonym or opposite of responsibility. So irresponsibility means to not have any sense of responsibility. So an irresponsible person is someone who does not think carefully enough about his or her actions and does not consider the possible consequences. All right, so today's read aloud is called The Open Road. What can you predict? What do you think is going to happen in our story called The Open Road? A title is a really good clue to what's going to happen in the story. So this title of this chapter, The Open Road, can give us clues as to what's going to happen. So let's see if your prediction was correct. All right, here's our characters we've had so far, right? We've kind of met Badger and we've kind of met Toad, but mostly we've been with Water Rat and Mole. If you remember, personification is when an animal or thing in a story behaves or is described like a person. Think of personification. So if the animal's talking or wearing clothes, they're being personified. Some vocabulary you might hear today in the read aloud is call on, which is a verb. It means to visit socially. So you're going to call on your aunt. You're going to go visit your aunt. Common, all right, it's a noun. It's a place, a piece of land owned by many people and or open to the community. So I went and sat and ate my picnic on the commons, right? A piece of land where everybody can go. Mended is a verb. It means it's a doing word, right? And it means fixed, repaired, or patched up. Possessed is an adjective. It means controlled or owned by something. So you could say Rachel possessed a pet cat, right? That means she owns a pet cat. State is a noun. It's a physical or emotional condition or shape that something is in or way of being, often for a period of time. So you could say that the old swing set was in a state of disrepair, meaning it is not repaired, right? That's how it is. All right, we're going to start our read aloud today. So follow along with the words and look at the pictures and listen. Ratty, said the mole suddenly, one bright summer morning, I want to ask you a favor. The rat was sitting on the river bank singing a little song called Duck's Ditty that he had just composed. All along the backwater, through the rushes tall, ducks are a-dabbling up tails all. Ducks' tails, drakes' tails, yellow feet a-quiver, yellow bills all out of sight, busy in the river. Everyone for what he likes, we like to be, heads down, tails up, dabbling free. I don't know if I like that song, Rat, said the mole cautiously. Nor do the ducks, replied the rat. Rat, began the mole again, what I wanted to ask was, won't you take me to call on Mr. Toad? I've heard so much about him. Why, certainly, said the good-natured rat. Get the boat out. It's never the wrong time to call on Toad. He must be a very nice animal, observed the mole as he got into the boat and took the sculls. He is indeed the best of animals, replied Rat as they set off to visit the distinguished Toad. Before long, as they were rounding a bend in the river, they came in sight of an elegant old red brick house with well-kept lawns reaching down to the water's edge. There's Toad Hall, said the rat, and that creek on the left where the notice board says private leads to his boathouse, where we'll leave the boat. The stables are over there to the right. That's the banqueting hall you're looking at now. Toad is rich, you know. They glided up the creek and into the shadow of a large boathouse. There they disembarked and went in search of Toad. They found Toad resting in a wicker garden chair with a large map spread out on his knees. "Hooray!" he cried, jumping up on seeing them. "This is splendid!" He shook the paws of both of them warmly. "I was just going to send a boat down the river for you, Ratty. I need your help," said Toad. "It's about your rowing, I suppose," said the Rat. "Oh, pooh, boating," interrupted the Toad. "I've given that up. Now come with me, my dear friends. I have something to show you." I wonder what it is. He led the way to the stable yard, and there they saw a gypsy caravan, shining with newness and painted a canary yellow and green. So gypsies are a wandering people who originally came from northern India. A caravan is a large covered wagon that's used as a traveling home. Some gypsies, as well as others, traveled using caravans. Gypsies still exist today and travel in all kinds of different ways. "There you are!" cried the Toad. "There's real life for you. The open road, the dusty highway. This is the very finest cart of its sort. Come inside, take a look." The Mole was tremendously excited and followed him eagerly up the steps and into the caravan. The Rat refused to follow. It was indeed very compact and comfortable. There were sleeping bunks, a little table that folded up, a cooking stove, a bird cage with a bird in it, and a variety of pots and pans. And then there's a canary yellow, that's the color it was. "All complete," said the Toad triumphantly, and pulling open a cupboard to reveal a variety of tasty treats. "We are ready to set off this afternoon." "I beg your pardon," said the Rat slowly, "but did I overhear you say something about we? And set off, and this afternoon?" "Now, Ratty," said Toad, "don't begin talking in that sniffy sort of way. I can't manage without you. You surely don't mean to stick to your dull old river all your life." "I'm not coming," said the Rat. "And I am going to stick to my old river, and what's more, Mole's going to stick with me, aren't you, Mole?" "Of course I am," said the Mole, loyally. Oh, there's an example of loyalty. "All the same, it sounds as if it might have been fun," he added wistfully. The Rat saw that the Mole was disappointed. He hated disappointing people. Toad was watching both of them closely. "Come along in and have some lunch," he said diplomatically, "and we'll talk it over. We needn't decide anything in a hurry." During luncheon, Toad spoke enthusiastically of the joys of the open road, so much so that the Mole could hardly sit still in his chair. Before long, unable to disappoint his friends, the Rat had agreed to go. When they were ready, Toad led his companions to the paddocks, or small field, to capture the old gray horse. For his part, the old gray horse did not want to be captured. Eventually, though, the horse was caught and harnessed, and they set off. It was a golden afternoon. The smell of the dust they kicked up was rich and satisfying. Late in the evening, they drew up on a remote common, turned the horse loose to graze, and ate their simple supper sitting on the grass. At last they turned to their little bunks in the cart. Toad sleepily said, "Well, good night, you fellows. This is the real life for a gentleman." After so much open air, the Toad slept very soundly, and no amount of shaking could rouse him next morning. So the Mole and Rat set to work. The Rat saw to the horse and lit a fire, while the Mole trudged off to the nearest village for milk and eggs. The hard work had all been done by the time Toad appeared. They had a pleasant ramble that day along narrow by-lanes and camped as before on a common. This time the two guests made sure that Toad did his fair share of the work. As a result, when the time came for starting next morning, Toad was no longer singing the praises of the open road. Their way lay, as before, along narrow country lanes, and it was not till the afternoon that they encountered their first main road. There disaster struck, for as they strolled and chatted, from far behind them an unfamiliar sound could be heard. Glancing back, they saw a small cloud of dust advancing on them. From out of the dust, a faint pup, pup, pup sounded. Do you remember what an onomatopoeia is? That's right, it's a word that makes a sound, right? Like pup, pup, pup. Ignoring this strange vision, they turned to resume their conversation. Then in an instant, the peaceful scene was changed. A blast of wind and a whirl of sound caused them to jump out of the road. The pup, pup, pup sound rang out once more. As this sound rang out, they glimpsed a magnificent motor car with its pilot hugging the wheel. This splendid vehicle flung a cloud of dust in their direction and then was gone. At the sight and sound of this vehicle, the old gray horse reared and backed towards a ditch. Before long, the canary yellow and green-colored cart lay on its side. The rat danced up and down in the road. "You villains!" he shouted, shaking both fists. While Rat was shaking his fists, the toad sat straight down in the middle of the dusty road and murmured, "Pup, pup, pup, pup." For his part, the mole was busy trying to quiet the horse. Then he went to look at the cart on its side in the ditch. The rat came to help him, but to no avail. "Hi, Toad," they cried. "Come and help us." The toad did not reply. So they went to see what was the matter. They found him in a sort of trance, his eyes still fixed on the dusty road. The rat shook him. "Are you coming to help us, Toad?" he demanded. "Wonderful sight," murmured Toad. "The real way to travel." "Oh, stop being a fool, Toad," cried Mole. "And to think I never knew," continued the Toad. "But now that I do, what dust clouds shall soon spring up behind me." "What are we going to do with him?" asked the Mole of the rat. "Nothing at all," replied the rat firmly. "You see, I know him too well. He is now possessed. Never mind him. Let's go and see what there is to be done about the cart." A careful inspection showed them that the cart was in a hopeless state. The rat knotted the horse's reins over his back and took him by the head, carrying the birdcage in the other hand. "Come on," he said grimly to the mole. "It's 5 or 6 miles to the nearest town, and we shall just have to walk." "But what about Toad?" asked the mole anxiously. "Oh, bother Toad," said the rat. "I've done with him." So this is a British way of saying, "Forget about Toad, I'm done with him," right? They had not proceeded very far on their way, however, when there was a pattering of feet behind them, and Toad caught up. Or Toad caught them up. This is a British way of saying Toad caught up to them. "Now look here, Toad," said the rat sharply. "As soon as we get to the town, you'll have to go straight to the police station to lodge a complaint, and then you'll have to make arrangements to have the cart mended." "Police station? Complaint?" muttered Toad. "Me complain of that heavenly vision that has saved me. Mend the cart. I've done with carts forever." The rat turned from him in despair. "You see," he said to the mole, addressing him across Toad's head, "he's quite hopeless." On reaching the town, they left the horse at a stable and gave what directions they could about the cart. They went home by train and escorted Toad to his house. Then they got on their boat from the boathouse and set off for home. The following evening, the mole was sitting on the bank fishing when the rat, who had been chatting to friends, came strolling along to find him. "Heard the news," he said. "Toad went up to town and ordered a large and very expensive motor car." So what do you think is going to happen next? Toad with his motor car. We'll find out when we meet again to hear more of the story. All right, some questions. Were your predictions correct? What example of personification did you hear? There were lots of examples, right? Lots of animals doing things that people would usually do. So what causes the caravan to crash? Right? There's a speedy motor car driven by a reckless driver that causes the horse to rear up because it's scared and the caravan is backed into a ditch. What are themes? What does themes mean? They're broad ideas that come up many times over the course of a story or book. An author used to use them to help guide the story. How do the characters demonstrate the themes of friendship, loyalty, responsibility, and irresponsibility in today's read aloud? Give me one example of how one of the characters demonstrates one of these themes. Well, we have a few, right? Rat takes Mole to call on Toad. That's friendship. Rat agreeing to travel with Toad because he's worried about Toad traveling on his own. That's friendship and loyalty. And they're camping out on the commons. Responsibility, Rat and Mole take care of the work on the trip, even though Toad's not, right? Irresponsibility, that's a pretty big one in this one. Toad not helping on the trip. Toad not caring about the wreck. Toad buying a motor car. That's pretty irresponsible. Hospitality. Toad having Rat and Mole come in and have a meal. So hospitality is when you invite people over to where you live and you take care of them. Describe Toad and Toad Hall. Be sure to use adjectives and other words from the story. So we know Toad is not very clever. He's boastful, fun, generous, a nice animal, but he's also irresponsible, wasteful, and self-centered. And we hear that Toad Hall is old, dignified, big, and has red bricks. All right, here's an interesting question. Which animal in today's read aloud animals in today's read aloud are not personified? Right? The horse. Does the horse talk? Does the horse act like a person? No, the horse acts like a horse, so it is not personified. So compare and contrast Toad's reaction with moles and rats after they all see the motor car and the caravan wreck. So compare and contrast means how are the reactions similar and how are they different? So Toad doesn't seem worried about the wreck, right? He's in a dreamlike state. He's spellbound and fascinated with the motor car. He doesn't even worry about the fact that his caravan has wrecked. Now Rat and Mole are upset and they're frustrated and then they're angry at Toad because he doesn't seem to care about the wreck. Okay, so they have different reactions. What does Toad think about motor cars? What clues in the story tell you what Toad thinks and what he might be planning to do next? He acts like he's in a trance and makes a pup, pup noise, right? He likes the idea of how fast they can go and says that it's a real way to travel. So it's likely Toad is planning to get his own motor car because he doesn't seem to care about telling the police about the accident. All right, and then we hear at the end that he did get his own motor car. Our word for today is state. Can you say that word? State. In the read aloud, you heard a careful inspection showed them that the cart was in a hopeless state. So state can mean a few things. It can be a noun or a verb. As a noun, state has several meanings. The way it's used today means the physical or emotional shape or condition something is in. But you could also use state as which state do you live in the United States of America? Right? State as a verb means that you're saying something, you're saying words. Please state your name would be please say your name. All right, good job, third graders. So please make sure you answer the questions and watch the whole video. Let me stop.